Welcome to Coach's View podcast.
So we have our friend here, and I'm going to have him introduce himself.
I'm Kieron Testart. I'm one of the MLAs in the Northwest Territories.
Excellent.
I guess you know that locally.
Yeah.
For Range Lake.
For Range Lake.
Just out of town.
Absolutely. So, I mean, how are you finding things? I mean, you've been in, what are we talking here now? That's several months kind of thing to get a feel for things. And
Yeah. 6 months. I mean, we're more than that because we're coming up on the anniversary in November. So, yeah,
that's crazy. It's crazy. It's so
I know. It goes by quickly. So, I mean, I'm finding that there's some really good experience in there, and people who know how the job works and are ready to get to work right away. And we saw that we're pushing out legislation that's not government legislation. We've been moving motions that are driven by the members and their constituents, and they're people are willing to do that. Whereas typically assemblies kind of have to ramp up to that. So we hit the ground running, which
that's good. Yeah.
But that being said, there's a whole bunch of issues that aren't being addressed, right? And we can't move at the speed of the GNWT. We have to move faster.
Right.
But to move at the speed of the crisis, and we're walking into so many of those.
Absolutely.
And if we're not moving quick enough, they're just going to get worse.
Yeah, and we don't want to get into a situation where we're done, kind of like the thing that's been done in the past, Band-Aid situations where we're spending a bunch of money to put something in place that's ultimately not going to solve the issue. And then we're, a few years from now, we're back and we start again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, your gym is down the street from the embodiment of the homelessness crisis.
Absolutely.
The housing crisis.
Yeah.
And, the response, there's a reason these things are happening now. It's because we haven't been addressing them. Like past governments haven't been. And now we can't ignore them anymore. Problem's gotten worse. And like, I raised some of these issues in my first term, and there wasn't a lot of urgency. But now
you didn't hear anything about it, really.
Exactly. And even when you raise them on the floor of the House, right? It's just one member. And if it
meets support's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the support's out there, but it's amplifying that message. And we have, just like a podcast, but like, we have tools as MLAs, and whether that's social media or speeches on the floor, or whatever. But they're not always amplified loud enough, and sometimes they're drowned out by the other things.
So, I mean, we're going to be having a new treatment facility put in. Initially,
A wellness center.
well, yeah, I mean, that's where I was.
No treatment.
It was originally kind of forecast, and the rumors were that it was going to be an actual treatment facility, and now we've found out that that's not going to be the case. What are your thoughts on that? Is there, is there something else you would have liked to have seen done there?
Yeah, I mean, you talk to any of the shelter providers downtown, and they will tell you, like, there's a need for a 24-hour facility, right? Because right now you've got this facility that has this many beds, but they have rules around in this facility, and that's what they're finding with the encampment as well. And a lot of these folks have possessions that they don't want to just leave on the street; they want to bring with them, and the rules don't allow it. So we need something that can accommodate that. And I'm not convinced this new shelter is going to be, or the center is going to do that. And instead of like having these piecemeal solutions scattered around downtown, let's just put them in one place.
That makes sense,
right? And this is like a $26 million facility. Right. I don't think the government's going to build it on time and on schedule. On schedule and on budget. And I don't think they're going to staff it either.
That's the other concern too.
We can't staff our healthcare system.
So how
we're going to be able to staff a wellness center, because it's going to be the typical credentialism creep you see from the public service, where you need a master's degree or a doctorate to do the stuff we should be allowing Indigenous knowledge holders to do, and just changing our standards to be holistic and culturally informed, right? So I have huge misgivings. I've asked the infrastructure minister to pump the brakes and look over it and make sure it meets the needs of the NGO community, because they're the ones who are doing the heavy lifting here. It's not the government. And if the people who are on the front line providing these services to people who need that support don't have more, like, the right tools and the right facilities, we're just Band-Aids.
It's just another place for people to sleep is what.
One of the things that we found when we were campaigning and talking to people and doing the research and whatever was there's no treatment here. So they go down south, they get the treatment, and then there's no real next step here.
They come back, they're bounced back on the street.
And
right?
they're following it. We saw it, we've seen it, you're back in the streets in 6 months. Yeah. Right. So what's the next step? Is this going to provide that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's designed to do that. It's a safe place to go where you can start accessing those wraparound supports as they're being rolled out. But again, it's the NGO world that's holding the bag in that, and I feel bad for them because these are people with very limited resources. They're not the best paying jobs, and they work, their fingers to the bone to help the people who are most vulnerable citizens. And there needs to be more coordination. Like the minister of at least similar. So the health minister just needs to sit down. Our social services minister needs to pull these folks into a room and say, "How are we going to support each other?" This is how it works in a lot of other cities. Where
it makes sense.
Yeah,
The
work
blueprint's
together.
there.
Yeah, but they don't work
Right.
together, right? And the government's
That's always been the issue.
Yeah.
the government talks to each one of them separately, and they compete for limited resources, which is like, why are we competing? Why aren't we solving
Are we
the problem?
supposed to be on the same side here?
Yeah.
Ultimately, yeah, and that's so. I mean, essentially, what this facility is going to provide then ultimately is a place to lay your head, some daytime access, I would assume, and access to programming in other places. Is that what we're?
Yeah, I mean that's like the last this is business that started the last assembly, and now we've inherited it, and that's
Okay.
but that's why some of us are saying, well, let's pump the brakes.
Right.
It's not just me, right? Like it's other members as well.
Yeah.
I'm on the standing committee for social development. Yeah, so that's everything that runs through social services, health, education, culture. That's all within the committee's remit. And some people are like, why aren't you doing ECDev? And I said, well, I know we've got, ECDev minded people on there. I'm not sure if we have practically minded people on social development, who can coherently speak about policing and speak about those issues without it just becoming about, NGO world. Because like I said, those they're part of the puzzle, but we also need to be talking to police and not belittling police, but actually saying, you do an important job. How do we bring you to the conversation?
And they should be a part of the conversation.
Well,
they know these
they
things.
need
Resources
because-
need what would assist them in doing their jobs, so that they're
That's
they're
right.
going to put these people, because I mean ultimately they're the ones, if when things happen, they're the ones who are going to call. They're going to be dealing with these people directly, and this is going to, if they have the resources and they're able to talk to these counselors and talk to people who deal with the street people on a regular basis on a more personal level, maybe they'll be able to interact with them in a better way as well, right? Bring it all together, like you said, right?
Yeah, and when it comes, and like we have an organized crime problem in this territory
big
that
time.
I've never seen in my lifetime. And we have these vulnerable people who are being exploited by Southern gangsters.
That's one of the things
Yeah.
we were going to bring up.
And they come into our communities, and not just Yellowknife, like a Nuvik, Sigachik, Fort McPherson,
Betchico.
It doesn't matter the size. We get guys from like criminal or organized crime, drug dealers, and hitmen probably because of all the gang warfare. But they're from Toronto, right? They're taking flights to a Nuvik directly and then spreading it around.
No shit.
It's wild, right? And there was no police unit to deal with this. Now there is. We put it in the last bunch.
Right.
This is one thing that Premier Simpson and I agree on, and he's been very strong on this. And
Well, he has a legal background, doesn't he?
he has a law degree.
Yeah.
I've never been a lawyer, but he has a law degree. No, but I mean, Hay River's hardest hit by this, right? So he sees it in his backyard.
Well, this last kid that got nailed, he was the one who was busted in March down in Betchico, and then got nailed up here.
And he was wanted on a nationwide warrant from Edmonton.
From
Shot at some girl. So apparently, some young lady came out and shouted at them because they were making noise outside, revving their car up. And this guy shot up at them. And then this is the same individual who ended up here and was caught with a load of handguns. Right. And that's another thing that I'm hearing from a lot of people is there's guns all over the streets here.
It's because what you can see, some of the residents of these encampments are carrying pistols, right? They have guns strapped in their waistbands.
I mean, this encampment's right here.
Yeah,
It's in amongst a residential area. It's
Yeah.
right there.
yeah,
You can have the basement.
and the residents are worried. Right?
Yes, as they should be.
And unfortunately for most of this, it's been silence from government, silence from the local MLA. Like it took so much prodding to get people to actually, give a damn about what was going on, literally like in their backyard.
Yeah.
And landlords too, they weren't brought to the conversation. So you get these people writing letters being like, what the heck is going on? Like, I'm seeing this stuff. My kids are saying, we had a school over there. My kid's daycare is over there.
Montessori's right there. It's
Yeah.
literally across the street from him.
Absolutely.
And then the daycare in the corner.
So at the very least, like, let people have the community involved and saying like, we're talking to the neighborhood. Yeah, but the neighborhood's not part of your special task force, right? The landlords, local landlords, aren't part of the special task force.
And one of the things that I see a lot around here too is that if somebody were to voice their opinion on social media, perhaps, they're getting bombarded by others. right? Like that's
because because the problem is, of course, is everyone bases everything on ideology, and I mean it's great to have an ideology, but the reality of it is, look, I'm tremendously sympathetic with anyone who's gone through addiction or who gone through the residential schools and has difficulty with alcohol and all these other things, and we end up in these encampments, and it's not just Indigenous people that are there. There's white people, there's white people of every race, creed, and you can think of. But ultimately, the things that have happened to you in your life do not give you carte blanche to do whatever you want within the community. And the reality of it is the people who live within the community and our tax-paying citizens within the community have the right to be safe. And I've been, you obviously know my past and background, and I've been watching what's going on here, and I've kind of keeping my ear to the ground and looking what's happening. And it's concerning to me, man, because I have two young daughters that are growing up in this town, and I'm very concerned about the town that they're growing up in right now. And I think people are going to be in for a very rude awakening if they don't start to wake up and realize it's fine to care, but we have to care in a productive manner.
Yeah, and well, that's it. And I've been in politics a while now, and when I first got elected out in Cam Lake, one of the top issues was downtown homelessness, right? So it doesn't matter where you are in the city. It's not like there's people the people in Niven are like, I don't care, right? I just want my view of the lake. I don't really care. No, everyone is involved in this. We're a community and the solutions are not bust them out or get rid of them or lock them up, right? No, it's always been a compassionate solution, but people's compassion has limits when there's other strains that are put on them. And no one should feel bad about having these concerns or even voicing them, because when, the cost of groceries is 5 times what it was 10 years ago, when your job opportunities are running out, when the government's cutting student loans, cutting healthcare benefits, cutting programs and services across the board, right? Yeah. And the mines are closing. These are the additional pressures that put on you. So your ability to, there's a certain amount of luxury that comes from being able to care about bigger issues than yourself, right? Yeah. And again, so you need to first principles. You need to focus on your bottom line before you can focus on other people. So I think that's why we're seeing this conversation change a little bit. But also we haven't seen this level of organized crime in history.
It's going to get increasingly worse, and that's the thing. The signs are all there right now. For takeover situations, and when you start seeing the meth coming in, and it's the people you're seeing large encampments on the streets, we're going to start to magnify just like it did in every other city across the country. And if we don't start kicking it in the butt right now, a small town like this is going to be far greater affected. I mean, it's not a place like Toronto where you can, something happens on the other side of town, it doesn't really affect you. I mean, everything's 10 minutes away here. Right, so we're in walking distance to pretty much everything, right?
Well, this problem is worse than normally you can compare it to Toronto, Vancouver. It's worse than Vancouver right now. I
mean, our crime rate is one of the highest in the country per capita.
Well, no, the homelessness story. I'm not sure about the crime rate, but I'm sure that's true too. I mean, when you have more multiple murders in one, there's a problem, a real problem.
Yeah,
3 blocks from my house, right?
Well, that's the thing, and people are, I've had people tell me that they've had guns flashed at them, and you know what I mean, over simple little, even traffic incidents.
And not even that kind of stuff. Like my partner can't go to the grocery store or Walmart without being followed to her vehicle, right? And I know I have two friends that walk to work from Finlayson to this part of town over here at Eclo, and they're followed at 7:45 in the morning. Right, that's not safe.
And there's always been homeless people here. I mean, I came here in the early '90s when I was just a young pup looking, kind of checking the place out, and I actually worked security. I worked security for a little while in the mall down there. I mean, the place, they had the fountain then, and the whole place.
There were things to do.
Yeah.
And there was a mall,
and there was a whole bunch. There was a lot of homeless people there, but they were friendly. Yeah. You told them to move on, they moved on. It was guys, I didn't really kick them out of the mall, but that was part of my job. And you'd ask them, they'd move. They wouldn't.
My mom managed the MP's constituency office downtown. She knew them all by name, and they would come in. She'd give them a cup of coffee. Yeah. They were people who were down on their luck, and it really felt them.
Right.
There's a different.
Doesn't feel like that anymore.
And the evac screwed things up too.
Yes.
Because we brought back more than we left with, and many of the people who came back from here, they're not in the small communities either. They're not the typical population, and they have brought with them some of the stuff some of the problems that we're seeing.
Oh, no question.
And I don't think there's a plan. I mean, I don't think they had a good plan, because I think they were told. What I was told is that there was, during the evac, it was we should come up because it's easier to live there. There's lots of government services and things like that. And but nobody told them it was going to get cold, right? Yeah, and this is what we're struggling with, right? And there's not enough shelter space. Like we're missing 60 spots, or between 40 and 60 is the government's estimate. So,
And that number still wouldn't cover what we need.
well, no, I mean, but just to keep people off the streets in wintertime. I mean, this if even one person loses their life because there's a lack of shelter space, that's unacceptable.
Absolutely, I agree, 100%. Should never happen. So
And we can't let it happen as a government either. We can't do our best. We need to make sure it does not happen. And I don't know if the urgency's there.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, oftentimes in society, it takes something bad to happen before people really start to wake up. But I would really like to hope that that's not going to be the case. Like that, we're like you said, that people will get into that action mode right now and make it happen. And as a government, I'm glad to see that you feel that way and you're pushing for it. I'm happy to hear about the police or have a unit now that's going to start to impact this gang.
Yeah, it's 6 officers. And
Yeah, it's good. That's good to see.
So it's and that's millions of dollars that we're
So with the tent city kind of thing, like what is the plan there? Like are you aware of what the plan is with it? Or?
Well, there's the federal government has this it's funding for encampments to deal with encampments, and it's $200 million across the country, and you can get a chunk of it to build a holistic plan. So it's not just create some shelter space, like put a new portable out there.
Right.
It's actually build a plan with service providers, with wraparound supports,
Oh, nice.
the kind of stuff we're talking about. Like you can't just send someone down south for treatment, and then they come back and there's nothing for
It
it.
has to be a plan. Yeah.
There has to be a plan. So that's what the funding's for. Now, whether or not our biggest problem is, if you look at the housing continuum, there's I'm not an expert on this, but there's 12 or 13 different steps in that continuum. Everything from being unhoused to even being a landlord, and or having a permanent space, and we only have like 6 of those. And that's when they say the gap. So we don't have transitional housing, we don't have supportive housing. Like we have elements of these things, but not enough to rely on. So people go from homelessness to housed, and there's no steps to get them to
And
where
then
they
of
need
course,
to go.
they're not ready for that. And
Yeah, and especially like a lot of our social housing in Yellowknife is through private landlords, right? It's through leases with the housing authority, and like the landlords don't even know who they're renting to. Like the leases are held by the housing authority. So if something,
Right.
so if you're in a building with public housing tenants, your landlord has no idea who those people are. If you see problems and they complain, they have to work through the housing authority, and the housing authority doesn't give you any information, right? So it's just this mess that doesn't make a lot of sense. And that needs to change as well. There needs to be clarity and transparency. We need to change the Tenancies Act, because right now there's really no rules, and the rental officer has way too much discretion to just do whatever they want. It clogs the system, things slow down. So we need to make it clear that this piece of legislation is to protect tenants first, landlords second, but also give landlords the tools they need to evict people who aren't paying the rent, who are being disruptive in their neighborhoods and are causing damage to the property.
and can bring that element in as well. Like at the end of the day, if you're a former drug user and you get put directly in housing and you have a relapse, and then you're mixing with these gangs and whatnot, then those people are coming into the facilities. The safety of the other residents is a concern. The property itself is a concern. So I mean, there definitely needs to be better management of that from what you're saying. I mean, it's kind of scary.
I know Fredericton has that one facility they created where they do testing. You're allowed to be in there as long as you're clean. The second you fail twice, I think you're.
Well, I mean, Bailey House here is you gotta be sober. I think Lynn's place as well. So like we have those standards, but then if you're not, there's not enough.
There's nowhere to.
There's nowhere to go, right?
Nowhere to go. You're out.
Yeah.
You're going to private landlords, you know what I mean? And you end up in those situations, and there's no.
Yeah, and I mean, like no one, and you can't evict them because they have an addiction problem.
Right.
No.
Well,
There's a
again,
lot
where
of,
they,
a lot of functional alcoholics who take issue with that.
but where are they going to go? Even if they do get addicted, right? Where do you put them?
Yeah,
We-
yeah, exactly.
We
The
don't
problem
have
doesn't
that
go away. They end up on the street, and
Yeah,
they're still addicted, and then they've
Yeah.
got nowhere to live.
So we need local. That's the other thing we're not talking about. Like we need local treatment options, and not this flying people is not working. And the people who are saying this are Indigenous people, right? They're Indigenous leaders who are saying we need this, and we keep making a bottom line argument instead of trying to make it work. And this is an attitude we see for 75 years in the Northwest Territories. It feels like, but in particular in the last 20, right? That the government finds the problems and tells you about them, but they don't say, well, here's how we're going to get around them, right?
That's the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how are we going to fix healthcare? Well, it's hard. It's hard across the country. Cool. right? Yeah, we know that.
Yeah.
But what are you doing to resolve it? And like, what are the unique northern challenges? And what are your solutions to meet them? We got a whole Department of Health. What are you guys doing to solve the issues? And this where politicians are really important, because they need to be the ones directing and pushing that change. And we have some very good ministers who are seizing parts of those priorities we've given them and finding ways to make them work. We have some ministers who are taking their leads from the unelected officials, right? So it's the attitude is that you have a can-do attitude or a can't-do attitude, right? And we all know what the challenges are. You listen to, you've been on the campaign trail, you listen to other candidates, people talk, like when a question gets asked, what are you going to do about this issue? Most candidates will say, well, here's what I know about the issue. That wasn't the question. The question is how you're going to solve it, right? And just having an awareness of the problems. So most of our election campaigns are just who can best sum up what the issues are, with some desperate hope that those politicians are going to fix the problems. Well, but then they get mired down in this system.
Yeah,
and that just slows them down from getting rid
In
of
those quote unquote debates, which are
forums. We don't
forums,
do
right? Forums. I found that most people were doing that, where we were presenting solutions because we did the research and we looked at what Fredericton did, what other cities have done, and we're presenting solutions, but it didn't.
Well, but the thing is and I think that's what happens is a lot of times, someone gets elected, and then when they get elected, they're talking to the staff that's in place, and they're listening to that staff, and if they don't have a solution there, what's the next step? Okay, it's difficult. We know it's difficult. This staff doesn't have the solutions. This staff's not able to offer me the solution. Well, this is not a problem unique to the Northwest Territories. The information's out there. Can we bring in experts? Can we consult with people that actually do have the answers? We can't just throw our arms up in the air kind of thing and say, well, it's been difficult. That's the way it's always been. No, we have to solve the issue. I like your attitude on it at the end of the day. And like you said, there are ministers that are actually working and they're digging in and they're doing this. But ultimately, like I said, if you're taking direction just from the staff and it's the same staff that's been there and nothing's been happening, we've got to.
And it's not, and to be fair, this is not a knock against any individual. It's the system that's working. The system, the GNWT is monstrously complex in how it operates. It builds these layers and layers and layers instead of just going with what happened. Like instead of saying, well, this is how it works in Ontario or Nova Scotia or wherever, they say well, we can't do that. We have to make it unique and northern because we're unique and northern, and we create these new bodies and processes and things like that, and just everything gets slow. To propose legislation, it takes 6 to 8 months just to have the conversation about what you're going to write, and that's not even counting when the bill hits the floor and when it goes to standing committee, it's debated and all that kind of stuff. So everything is so slow, and some ministers are even saying in public, no less, that the window's already closed. Like we have our very limited agenda. We're going to get it done in 3 years, but a lot of the stuff you want to do will have to wait for the next government. We're not even a year in, and this is the state.
Frustrating.
Yes, yeah, and so some of it is like you need to push harder, but you need to know you can push. And we have a bunch very optimistic MLAs who've come in who want to change things, but don't know how to do that, right? So what are they going to do? Well, they rely on the people who work in the departments and give them advice, and they should. But those people are all part of the same system. It's
exactly, and it's convoluted.
I had my first 2 years up there. I worked for a couple of ad agencies, and I've seen the redundancy and the layers within the GNWT and how painful it is as my client. I'm just like, how does anything ever get?
So we could we could take the recommendations that have been made by management consultants, by frontline staff, by the medical association to fix healthcare, or we could appoint an ADM who's going to assemble a team and then write a report. Which do you think the premier did? He hired the ADM. Yeah. Instead of the $600,000 report that we've already got done, instead of all these other things, right? Government renewal initiative that was going to simplify a lot of the management structures and create savings, and also create some redundancies that would have to be sorted out, but it was sweeping across the board. Instead of actually implementing that, they watered it down, turned it into an evaluation framework for future budgeting decisions. So this thing that was supposed to transform the government, make it leaner, like in when you're talking about the Toyota system, like the lean system, right? To actually make things work better.
More efficiency.
Out the door.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Out the door. You know, this huge project of the last government just out the door, right? We just waited those guys out, and now we can start fresh with something that's less. That means we have to change less.
Yeah, and you know, and as someone like I've lived here since 2010, and I've talked to a lot of people with there for long periods of time that are looking for a way out. They're looking to leave, and they're saying that the terrorism, the opportunities are not hitting, the costs are high, crime's out of control, the situation's out of control. They don't feel comfortable. They don't seem safe. Ultimately, the last thing that they want to hear from a government is the window's closed. You gotta wait for rain. Right? Well, sorry guys. At the end of the day, and I mean, I know obviously there's limitations to what you can do in a 4-year period because there is a lot of build up. There is it takes a lot of time to even get to the point where you're actually pulling the trigger on something. And I'm hoping that the process will speed up and they can get a little bit more efficient. But ultimately, nobody wants to hear that any of the issues that are really impacting us right now is a closed issue.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Well, you have a government too that's prioritizing its financial needs over the needs of the public, right? And and not making the tough, like if you're serious about cuts, about finding efficiencies, because right now our revenues are growing at 3%, 2 to 3%, but our expenditures are growing at like 6%, right? So this is the problem, yeah. And then when the mines shut down, our revenues are they're probably going to flatline to a degree, but because we get so much money from Ottawa, it just kind of continues to increase. And the more the southern provinces spend, the more money we get. So that's why we're seeing it go up. So when I left office in 2019, it was a $1.9 billion budget. Now it's $2.5 billion, right? Give or take. So that's a significant. So we have a stable revenue stream that's not dependent on taxation and resource royalties. It's just dependent on us being a child of Ottawa, which is good. But we have to fix that expenditure piece. But when you create 1,300 jobs in 4 years, that's why you have an expenditure problem, because you're addicted to these expensive jobs that are blowing the budget out of proportion, and then you're unwilling to cut them. So instead, what do you cut? Health benefits, scholarship, or students' financial supports. You cut the things that actually make a difference to people's lives. I have constituents who are paying $800 a month now when they used to pay nothing. These are hardworking middle class folks, working people, but they're not 65, right? So they have to pay. Why do we have to make people, a population of 40,000 people, why should we be clawing benefits back from them? We should have the best benefits in Canada.
Absolutely.
You want people to move here, make it worth their while.
Absolutely.
Because you're paying $5, $5.50 for gas in Norman Wells.
Yeah.
Why the hell would anyone move there?
And that's the thing. I mean, and at the end of the day, it was interesting to me when I saw the clawbacks on education, because, a lot of the individuals that went in were very high on the ideas of new schools and making this a center of education and all that kind of thing. And that's not something I would be opposed to, obviously, but at the end of the day, if we're trying to attract students here, we're not clawing back the benefits that are going to even keep the ones we have here.
Yeah. And the Minister Cleveland will say, look, we have other supports, we have other benefits, and we've actually made some of those even better than they were previously. It's just this one thing phasing out. And it's well, fine. But what it represents is what people got upset about, right? Is the bigger picture of
also how it was portrayed in the news as well initially.
Which was accurate. Nobody knew about this. We didn't know about it, right? They buried it in the budget, which is not on, right? One of the principles of consensus government is there's no surprises. And when I'm finding out it, and I checked, because I'm maybe I missed something. Everyone makes a mistake. So I went to talk to a colleague. We looked through the document, finally found it. We talked to our research staff. We talked to everyone. Nobody saw this.
Really?
Nobody saw this.
So what exactly are the students losing?
It's about $600K. It was $300,000 this year, but it's a Northern bonus program, so it's worth up to $10,000, and it's a $2,000 additional remission just for being here. But it applies to repayable loans as well as remissible loans. So there's someone I know who didn't go to school here, but lives here and wants to stay here, and went and got repayable loans. And then they were able to get this Northern bonus and pay off these loans without cash money. So it made it easier to get out of the debt position. Now she's got to pay it all back.
Yeah.
So, and ultimately it's just less benefit.
That's a shock, though. I mean, when you made a plan, and then that's a major impact on somebody's life. And I had someone mention to me something, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but there was funding cut back for housing as well for students.
I don't know about benefits. I mean, some things have changed, especially if you have disabilities. There's a lot of changes there. And that's something that we have to work on, because what used to be managed by by NGOs is now being managed by the government.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people, because of those changes, their needs aren't being met. So we need to just tweak and refine that. But I think that's just some kinks that need to be worked out. But as far as specific housing benefits, I don't know.
Yeah.
They have increased the allowances for like books and I think some other stuff like meal plans and things like that. So it's not like we have a bad system by any means. This was just you're making a great system good, right? So like, why take anything away?
Yeah.
When you're and the minister will say, well, we used to have a 77% retention rate for student loan beneficiaries. Now it's dropped to 72%. Like, well, that's not one thing. It's not one program. So this idea that like we need to keep kids in debt longer to keep them here, it's like, are you kidding me? Right? People should want to stay here because it's the best opportunities for them. And if it's not and they choose to leave, well, so be it.
So is it a
empower
cut?
kids?
Is this a cut, or is the funding reallocated somewhere else?
No, it's a cut. It's a straight cut.
Well, I mean,
because they need to find $150 million, right, that they want to make on a principal interest and government debt, or principal payments to lower their interest payments. So again, and I support this, right? Like, we need to at least have a balanced budget, right?
Yeah.
This is not like, I think some people, like the cabinet, when we're having these debates, like to portray us as like, well, you guys are just frivolous, right? Like, you want to keep everything, you want to keep spending money. We have the big boy pants on, and we're making these decisions that are necessary. And it's like, well, hold on. We all want the same thing, which is good government, right? Fundamentally, peace, order, good government. These are the things that Canadians care about most of all. We need a balanced budget, but it can't be balanced on the backs of Northerners, right? Like, it needs to be balanced in a way that we still provide the best possible quality of life for citizens, and make smart decisions to achieve that, right? And saying we're going to do this without cutting a single public service position that's not being made, that's not like being made redundant, not redundant, sorry.
That is redundant.
Yeah, well, no, we'll keep.
Well, I'll go on record.
But like people who retire, right? We're not gonna. So if it's a position that was retiring, and they won't bring that one back. But like if it's a working person, there's and look, I support that as well. But the elephant in the room is, again, these 1,300 jobs that were created in 4 years. It's a public service. It's a 6,000 strong public service. PEI is 140,000 people. They do it with 3,000 to 4,000 public servants, right? So
makes no sense.
And they'll say, well, the North is really big. So yeah, but most
population wise, it's not.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of these services are people based, right? They're not geographically based. So yeah, like this is what we need to do. And
they're not low paying jobs either. I mean, these are not low paying jobs.
They're unionized positions. Yeah. They're well compensated positions. If you work in private sector, your direct competition is always the GWT, and sooner or later an employee is going to come to you and say, "Hey, boss, I'm sorry." Right? And it makes it very hard to retain skilled workforces. But if we had more to draw on, right? Like maybe we need to create more jobs first, right? Because we have a shortage of jobs. But government needs to create jobs by creating industry, or by stimulating industry and advancing industry and cutting red tape and making it easier to do business. It shouldn't just be creating jobs for the sake of job creation. Mm-hmm. I want to create government positions so they serve the public, or they help a government achieve its objectives, right?
If we don't need to make work projects at the end of the day, we need actual needed positions and that come with revenue attached to them at the end of the day.
Like, you look at the Mackenzie Valley Highway news story that was just on Cabinet a little while ago. They're like, the GWT is going out with an RFP for a consultant to write this new business case. I'm like, well, don't we have people in infrastructure who are very well paid and very smart? I know them, like the engineers and stuff.
That's their job, yeah.
Couldn't they?
Yes,
if not, what are they doing that's not letting them do that work? Like, we go to a consultant for every big piece of policy like that. And you need a third party advice on some things,
some stuff.
But it just seems like this one, like a business case, when you already have the old one, like, Anyway, I'm not a technical expert. I don't know, but you see that all the time, and you ask these questions like, so what are we getting for? I was talking to an MLA colleague, and they were saying we added 1,300 people. Where are they? Right? People in the regions don't see them, and that's the other problem is you say like you hear this number, and if you're in Inuvik or Hay River or Toyota, you don't see these new positions. So you're like, well, they're all in Yellowknife. But they're not here either. Right? A lot
Yeah,
of those jobs are
exactly.
unfilled, right?
Yeah.
They're on the books, but they're unfilled, and the money's being used for something else.
Interesting. So, what are your thoughts on? I mean, I know as we talk about the mines, and I know there's been some sort of extension recently put on one of the mines. It's going to continue to operate for or hopefully it's going to continue to operate. But you know, as a source of revenue, what are your thoughts on the military projects that are going to
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
infrastructure? I think that's something that's going to.
My family came north because of defense spending. My dad worked on the DEW line, which is a distance early warning system. So those big radar domes on the Arctic coast, so
Gotcha.
the line of radar sites in case any missiles were lobbed over the Arctic from Russia, right? So we could know before we all have to
Well, I mean,
duck and cover.
a lot of people don't realize it, because they often, I've had people say to me, well, I mean, we don't have to worry about anything up here, with the world issues. We're a direct path, right? We are the path.
No matter what, when there's a shock, like the food prices because of the Ukrainian, right? Like we felt that first, not last, because we're the most vulnerable to those shocks. Climate change is the same thing.
Yeah.
We're the most vulnerable to these changes. So we need that resilient infrastructure. We also need that military presence because if there's competition for the Arctic Passage, especially when the ice is fully clear and
There will be.
again, there will be. Because like even the U.S. are allies, right? They are like it's international waters, Canada.
They want it. Russia wants it.
Yeah,
we want
And
it.
they're all toying with it a little bit, right? How far can I push right now?
Yeah, and I mean they didn't sign on to the international law of the sea. So there is a law that gives Canada that sovereignty, but the U.S. can just push us around. So hopefully, I mean, but at least we can work with the U.S. But like, how are we going to defend our claims? Having the Rangers pay for their own gas to go up there and check things out, like that's not unacceptable. Like we need to be providing the Rangers with the resources they need. Like they only got new rifles for 2 rifles like 5 or 6 years ago, right? So, and I know Michael McLeod's he's a former Ranger. He's big on this and he's done a lot of good work for them. We need to keep that going. The Liberals have finally figured out that we need to do more than talk the talk. To walk and have this big infrastructure military investment.
And it comes down to too as well. I mean, one of the things that international law looks at when we're claiming territories and sovereignty is having a population
Presence.
in the region. So it is important to Canada that we're here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But what keeps us here is those kind of investments, right?
Yeah.
Because there's 2 things. There's government spending and there's natural resources. Those are the 2. And tourism is like a great industry that we've been able to develop. It's especially good for Yellowknife because we're a destination city in the world, and that's pretty remarkable given the expense that it takes to get here.
Yes,
we
exactly.
we pulled it off, and the good reason because it's the most beautiful place to live in the world. But that's a benefit. It's not going to sustain the entire economy. Natural resources are, but while we wait because we've royally messed that up and now we're playing catch up with these new projects, we need something to buffer us, and these defense commitments are really good. We need to figure out where those bases are going, the staging areas, where the money's going. The commander, like there's talk here of having an active or a larger reserve force, but we need housing for them, right? And to get housing, we need land. And I've been fighting 10 years, either like as a individual or as a politician, to say, transfer the land to Yellowknife so they can actually start planning these things out.
The land is there.
The land is
It's
there.
just-
There's no urgency. Again, we'll get to it when we get to it. So now's the time to get to it, right? Like
We have a housing shortage.
I mean, and I know a lot of people don't. I mean, this is a relatively liberal place, and I'll go on record and say that I'm a supporter of the Conservatives at this point. I used to be a liberal. What a liberal used to be.
Doesn't surprise me.
I absolutely used to be a liberal, but right now I feel that I feel that economics is an important thing that we need to really look at. And when it comes to housing, it seems odd to me because I hear even on a federal basis, like land, war impacts and COVID, all these things have slowed things down. But I mean, in the G7, we've got more land than anybody. More viable land. We sure as hell got a lot of wood. I mean, the components that are required to build a house, land, wood, tradespeople, we have all those things. So it's an odd problem for us to have when you consider that, and a lot of it's just red tape.
It is. And like we use the National Building Code, right? There's no territorial building code, so that's something that they're working on now. Then we could address these standards where we say, do we need the same kind of standards when you're building in downtown Toronto that you need in MLA? No, you don't. Like we already know the answer. So again, that's the problem. Solution. Let's get that legislation moving. Like the land, when we're talking about land transfer, we're talking about GNWT owned land, giving that to the city so they can develop it, and transferring the administration so they don't have to pay for surveying and all that kind of stuff. Right. And you'll hear when these arguments are going on, well, what about land claims? Doesn't affect land claims because these are parcels that are selected. They're not withdrawn. They're held by the public government. And, I've spoken with the Acacia leadership, and they have you can't go around as the government and say, well, we can't do it because of land claims when you give an over Casti Point. You give fee simple title to all the people who live out in Casti Point and Prelude. And there's an ongoing land claim around that place too. So you saw fit to do that because enough was enough. Those folks had waited long enough to receive that. And there were commitments made by previous governments. So they just did it. They pulled the pin. And when they did that, the chiefs in Dilo and Deta were not happy about it and complained publicly and said, you shouldn't be doing this. But they did it anyway. So again, when it meets the government's needs, when the minister stood up on the floor and said, honor of the crown says we have to do this. Well, they did it. But when other people need something, we gotta wait. When the time's right, you gotta be patient though. Yeah. No, the government should be there to serve the people first. And
exactly, 100%. And ultimately, we obviously know there's a lot of work to do, and there's processes that have to be done, but we want to serve the people, and what the people want are these issues solved ultimately, right? Yeah. And to see action, because anybody with a brain understands that things can't happen overnight.
They can happen in 4 years, though.
Yes, yes, 4 years is really a lot.
Except if you're closing the door after you're 1 of 4 years.
But I mean, it's
6 months.
The reality of it is 4 years is a long time. I mean, a lot can happen in 4 years, right? We understand that everybody has to get in there. There's new MLAs that don't have any experience and have to learn, how the inner workings of the government,
Most places, except for Nunavut, and I think Nunavut has. I like how they do consensus. It's different than ours. I mean, it's hard to tell the differences, but and it's not just the two, right? There's the Isle of Man does consensus government, the Isles of Jersey and Guernsey, all kind of British Commonwealth traditional places. They all do consensus government. They all do it a bit differently. So it's worthwhile to see how, we're not unique. There's other players in this game, and we should be looking to learn and grow from them so things aren't stagnant, because everywhere else in Canada, eventually a government gets replaced. Yep. It might be like Alberta where it rules for 75 years, but eventually the party stops, right? And they're showing the door. And when that happens, things change, right? And I'm a liberal. Everyone probably should know that by now if you've been paying attention to my nonsense. But when I see what happens in these provinces, like in Ontario, right? The Liberals had a lot for so long and a very unpopular premier, even though a lot of people like the policies. But they voted out the politicians and they got brand new policies. Many of them didn't like it. And so people say, well, party politics sucks. But hey, guess what? You could vote Doug Ford out. It might be hard and you're going to have to pull the pieces in, but at least you can change out your government and have a new approach to the issues. Because when you're trying to solve the same issues for 70 years, you lose perspective on what those are. And people in the Northwest Territories have had the same government for 70 years, right? It's never changed.
And that's the thing, when I look at government, and it's one of the things I do like about, the consensus government and not, the non-party system is great in one sense that it's not partisan.
It's not ideological.
It's not ideological.
But it's partisan.
Yes.
And we can talk about that, but it is. Make no illusions. And there are factions in there.
Yeah.
There are people who have power and people who don't. Mm-hmm. And we sit across from each other, right? We don't have a seating plan where it's like minister, regular member, minister. It's oppositional and it's adversarial in that regard, right? We have 7 ministers. They vote as a bloc, right? When they vote, that means they need 2 people to tie the House and effectively win any vote. If I want to move a bill or a motion or something, I need to convince 9 people to agree with me, and they have all the money, all the appointments, the machinery of government at their beck and call. I have nothing except my
You have
good
nothing to
intentions.
offer except your good
And
intentions.
my good intentions. Yeah, and I mean, like, hopefully being a bit, like, not because we're not constrained by that machinery of government,
Yeah.
we're able to speak directly for the needs of our constituents. And that tension is natural, but it's just like people who think, and I think it's because not everyone's watching what we do every day, and so much of what we do is in secret, so it's hard. But even in a party system, like, you see the news, you see what the parties want you to see, right? Because that's all part of their game too, their messaging.
Mhm.
So we don't have the same incentive, so we just keep everything in house. But people don't see how it really goes down. They don't see the closed door meetings when people are really upset and feel like they've been disadvantaged. I don't even know what goes on the cabinet table. I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But like, we had to fight and beg and borrow and steal to get less than 1% of requests through on the last budget. Like in a multi-billion-dollar budget, we were asking for like less than $30 million. And it was like, the sky's going to fall if we cave into you. And it took like the 11th hour intervention of the premier so we could move forward on this, right?
Yeah.
It
should, yeah.
Isn't consensus government supposed to avoid that, right? Like,
It's what it's supposed to.
it's supposed to be a give
Yeah,
and take.
yeah, no, yeah.
And because it never gets to that crisis point, so it doesn't go public, right? And then typically when it does, people draw lines, right, based on who their favorite MLA.
Well, yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, that's what I'm, like, when it comes to politics, I mean, obviously we talk conservative, we talk liberal, but I mean, ultimately, what I really truly am at the end of the day is someone who wants to see results, right? And if I feel that this individual or that individual can get the results that we want, then that's the one that I want to see in power.
But if the system doesn't let you get results,
yes,
to me, that says, well, the system needs to change.
Yes.
It doesn't have to get burnt down necessarily, but you only have 4 years to work with. So you have to find a way, like, how can we build a system where MLAs can come into it, be effective over 4 years, and go back with some results that people understand and feel and see? And it's very challenging. And I don't know what the right answer is.
And you know what, you're very right, because everyone talks about the fact that everything, when I was going through the campaign process here, all I heard was the wheels move slow, and they do, because, as you said, there's just a lot of little moving parts there, and by the time we get them all kind of shifted in place, it's we're at the end of our 4 years, and we're.
The other thing we heard a lot of is we want change, we want change, we want change, but they voted a lot of the same type of people back in.
No, not really.
No?
This is the biggest turnover in the history. So
They're same type, not same people.
Oh, same type, sure. Yeah.
Same type of people.
Like in 2015, it was the biggest turnover in history. 2019,
Yeah.
it was even bigger.
Yeah.
And 2023, even bigger.
Yeah.
So what this means to me, and I don't have a doctorate in political science. I only have a bachelor's, but just looking at it, it's like people aren't happy, right? Like, it doesn't take a political scientist to see this.
No, it doesn't.
If you're not getting results, and this isn't just a Northwest Territories issue, this is across the board.
Absolutely.
You see governments getting swept in and out of power, like, and even parties that are more successful, like in the UK, when the Tories had that, decade of power, they had all those prime ministers, because even when they had a lot
They
of
weren't happy
power,
with.
the coalition was unstable because people were like, you promised us Brexit. This sucks. Like,
Yeah.
you promise what you promised us, you're not delivering on. And, that's why we keep getting swept out. And if we underperform and don't deliver, same thing's going to happen to this assembly too. And the way we're going, that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
And I take no pleasure in that. Right?
Well,
and even if things had worked out differently for me, in terms of like premier, cabinet minister, or whatever, I still think we'd be in the same position, and that sucks, right?
But the thing is,
It's-
you're I mean, you like admittedly you're a liberal, but at the end of the day, when you campaign, though, you campaigned on the issues. Right?
Yeah, like-
you campaign on the
yeah.
issues, you campaign on results, and I mean, ultimately, what you had to say, a lot of what you had to say made sense. So unfortunately, though, I feel like, and I'm not, this is not about individuals, but ultimately, I think a lot of times people here they do vote based on ideology, right? Even though it's a it's not a conservative liberal system.
Yeah.
They want people in there that have the same values that they have, and I mean, it's to me, a lot of it doesn't really come down to values as much as it does. We need a system that works. Ultimately, a government is a business. The business has to provide its service. It has to take care of its employees. It has to take care of its customers more than anything. And ultimately, it has to stay afloat. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. If I can't meet my budget, then I can't make the other things happen for sure. We've got to have economic sense. But at the same time, we got to remember we're not open for the staff. If I have to cut staff to make the experience of the members better, and that's what I have to do because the clients ultimately are what put us here.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing.
And there's so many jobs that aren't filled too. Like that's the thing. Like it's no one should feel panicked about like waves of layoffs happening. Like I'm not going to let that happen. And the government doesn't have the stomach for it. It's just, but we need to be realistic because we can't keep going on the way we're going. We need to prioritize things, and trying to do everything with just less is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like when I was in university, I had a professor who told me like, know where you're coming from. Don't approach your work even as an academic by saying I'm nonpartisan and I'm going to approach this with a neutral lens.
Mm-hmm.
So like know who you are, where you stand, what your influences are, and make sure that you understand that before you try to be independent, because you need to know your own biases moving forward. So
Absolutely.
the fact that people know I'm a liberal and I don't try to hide it or say, oh, well, now that I'm elected, I can't be in. No, I mean, like, that's where my background is. And it doesn't mean I'm excluding conservative voters or anyone.
But you're still you're still ACTEV friendly. You're still like, and that's
yeah, because we're not all liberals are tree hugging.
and that's what I mean.
The terms change.
And that's the thing. I think in a lot of cases, a lot of the, I wouldn't even call some people liberals. I'd call them far left, right? And there's a difference between being far left and being a liberal.
Sure, and I mean, like, sustainable development, I think conservatives, liberals, Green Party, like, you don't get behind that. Just how we do it. Like, what does that actually look like?
Yes.
But I mean, I'm a liberal who brought forward legislation to repeal the carbon tax. So that's consensus government for
I mean,
right?
like you made the comment, like, you listen to Polyev now, and I mean, a lot of things that he says sound a lot like what John Kretschmann was saying, back in the day in a lot of ways.
He's squid.
Yeah. Right.
But like the term liberal and the term conservative has shifted so much in the last little bit. I would never, 10 years ago, if you'd have told me I've been considered more conservative than liberal, I'd be like, no, that's never going to happen. But
again, it's there's far right and there's conservative. I'm not far right.
Not far right.
There's a difference, right?
No.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I like the common sense.
Pitch people's values or their rights or their, and I'm not. I don't want to, how people live their lives individually. I mean, that doesn't matter to me.
But at least you can articulate that to people. That's the real value of it in politics, at least.
Yes.
Is you can instantly sum up what you stand for. And then you can talk about the nuances, right?
Yes.
But if you say like, so what are you all about? Because right now it's like, well, everything and nothing, right? And I feel like if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of our most successful politicians in the Northwest Territories, you can point them and say like, what do they stand for? And I think if you really think about it, you'll say, I don't know. And no one in public or in politics should be that mercurial. Because what guides their decisions? And if they're in there for 13 years, and you don't know what they stand for, what have they been doing?
Exactly.
And they'll say, I've been listening to my constituents, but it's like, yeah, but you know what? Not every constituent is coming to you.
I want to check the algorithm on your YouTube.
What we could do referendum, but like we all have people we listen to. We all have people who are close friends and political advisors, right? And some people open that circle, and some people don't. I always try to talk to people on both sides of the spectrum to get a good balance, because people from outside of my circle too, because if you talk to your friends, they're like, "You're doing a great job, buddy."
Yeah.
Like that doesn't help you succeed or grow as a person, right? So yeah. And I feel like I've grown a lot from being a younger person in public office to being unelected, to having to find work, having that experience, having more kids, starting a
Kids will age you.
The more it's that old wisdom thing. At the end of the day, the more battles you face in life, ultimately, more you learn from those battles, and even from observing other people's battles. At the end of the day,
and I think there's value in being a firebrand or a rabblerism and trying to shake things up. I think but you either grow from that and become more measured and more practical, or you just stay an activist. And there's nothing wrong. We need activists. They're the ones who are pressed to do things. But I think especially in a system like this that's so loose and liquid, like, and you need to make it work, you need to grab all these strands, and you need to build coalitions on every single issue. Right?
There's no point in sticking to something that's not going to be productive for you, and that it's not going to let you work productively.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like, but again, at the end of the day, I'm the exact same mind. It's common sense, right? I want results from my writing. When a constituent comes and says, this is my problem, can you solve it? That's what I want. And if the minister can't solve it for me because of the system, then the system needs to change. And I've always felt that way. Right. And I think it's so easy to boil this down to like, well, you're a party politics guy. It's like, no, I want a system that's better. Right. Mm-hmm. And that, you look at all the options out there, what else is there? Tell me the other option, because
the voting process there within the House is there's an imbalance there at the end of the day. And that needs to change, because at the end, we all know how politics works at the end, people are put in positions and put in ministerial positions as well because of allegiances to other individuals. I can say that you can't, but that's reality. They are, and that's how it works. I've actually, not in this election, but in the previous election, I had a little bit of an inside scoop, and I got to sit down with a friend of mine who. We went down with another individual who's fairly influential in the city, I'll say, and I'm not going to name any names, but I got to watch a little bit of the finagling and manipulation that goes on, and how people got put into positions and whatnot, and it was quite eye opening, to see it firsthand, and it's not quite the way people think it is.
We don't even know the vote totals in our system, right? Like, we know who the premier is, but we don't know how many people voted for him.
Yeah,
we know who the ministers are. We don't know how many votes they got, and I think that's ridiculous. And they say, well, we do it to make sure there's no hard feelings and people can move forward. It's like, nah, no. It's worse because you second guess everyone, right? And there are some members, and I won't name names, but they'll get in your head, right? And whether they're doing it just to do it or like to tease or whatever, like, we all have big egos in this world, and it plays with you, right? Because you're like, well, I don't know, maybe I don't know who voted for me.
And then
could have gotten one vote, might have just been me.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a little Game of Thrones at times, right? Yeah. And that's why when the decisions are made at the beginning, accountability is so hard, right? Because
it becomes hard to trust people.
Well, not even that, but if we do say, well, this minister's not performing, and they need to be taken out, because that's the only tool we have, right? We can't defeat a budget. We can't go to an election again. The only tool we have is to say, you're not doing your job as a minister, we're taking you. But now we got to put some. We got to do all that unpleasantness we did at the beginning. Now we got to do it again. And people, and more often than not, no, I don't want to do that again. I'd rather not. Let's just stick with what we've got. Yeah. Maybe the next election will get better results. But we shouldn't be in that situation as well. No. In our system, it should be easier to do that, right? And it shouldn't be this full-blown. Because if it's true that it's a minority government, then it should be easy to take out the government. That's the whole idea of minority government. So the government has that incentive to work with everyone. Right now, like I said, with the votes, right?
It doesn't work.
It's a majority government.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes a minority government is the presence of political parties that can vote as blocks. So we have one vote block and nothing else.
Exactly.
Right. And so again, if this is the system people want, then great. Then let's try then. But this is what you get. You get a slow system that's where politicians get to spend a lot of time talking about the issues, but not a lot of time solving. Yeah. Right. And that is the strength of the consensus system. It's definitely a very good system.
It's a major flaw.
But it's a good system for MLAs.
Yes. Yes. Well, absolutely.
And I wonder why it doesn't change, right?
Yeah. It's a good system for MLAs. And in a sense too, it does open things up because, individuals that are not affiliated with a party can run, where in other situations it's far more difficult to be put in a nomination position.
No, look, and parties have their own downsides too. There's no perfect system, right? It's like democracy is the worst system except for every other system.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, at least in most places in the country, right? You have as many as 3 choices for your voting, right?
Yes.
Who your candidate is, or who your MLA is going to be, or MPP or MP, what party or ideology they represent, and who the leader is who's ultimately going to be premier or prime minister.
Yeah.
You have nothing here.
No,
right?
We don't know.
And then the platform, the actual platform they run on that they're going to implement. So you have one choice, which is who's going to represent you. After that choice is done, 19 people decide what the government's going to do, how it's going to spend taxpayer money, and who's going to be in charge of those decisions. And it's all done by a super secret ballot where no one even knows the vote totals.
Which I don't believe. That's,
So, like, that's not the kind of system I think most people, when you think consensus, that's not what they hear. And, look, someone who really loves this system, I could probably debate with them and they say a very different thing and talk about why all those things are good. That's fine. These are trade-offs. If you want a system that, again, is more results driven, more transparent, there's other options. There's better options.
I mean, and I mean, it's not even a matter of who voted for who, but the numbers even. That way, at least
I'm saying that.
A politician knows. Okay, listen, I had 5 people that said they were going to vote for me in this situation, and I got 1 vote, or I got 2 votes.
You know how many people voted for you in the last one?
Yes.
I know how many people voted.
Yes.
We know how many people voted for every candidate who ran.
Yeah.
But nobody knows who voted for how many people voted for the people who ran for cabinet.
And then sometimes we end up with a premier that's only the premier because they didn't want someone else to be a premier. Is what it comes down to.
Usually, it's the person who's like has the most common commonality with other members, but in their ideas. So when they think like, what are they going to do when they go there? Are they going to be driving a very strong agenda, or are they going to be letting a more collaborative approach and like how it's portrayed your brand, where you're from? Like there's a because we don't have ideological divides, we have regional divides and we have racialized divides.
Yes.
Right. And there is
the impact. There's no question.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, there's inequity in this territory, right? It is not the same experience getting government services in an Indigenous community, a small rural Indigenous community, than on the streets of Yellowknife.
Of course not.
We have to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
But that's an active process that government has to go through and constantly improve. But what is the incentive for change right now? Because the only incentive I see is, you say, it's really hard to help those people in Kikisa or in Sax Harbor. It's really hard to help them. So we do our best, but
That's all we can do.
that's all we can do. And they're like, yeah, that's true. It's really hard. And then we move on, right?
Too often that's accepted, and it's not. It's
Because the past, we've been lowering expectations. Government works very hard to lower expectations to the point where people expect nothing. It's just like, you talk to people now, they're like, well, I know the government's broke. What do you mean broke? Like $2.6 billion in the Northwest Territories? Who else has that kind of money? City Yellowknife doesn't have that.
no.
Hay River doesn't have that. YKDFN doesn't have that. YKDFN has to apply for every dollar. Most First Nations have to, and Inuit communities have to apply everything and then report back everything for just keeping the lights on in the community. So having $2.6, which is just handed to you, or billions of dollars that's handed to you by Ottawa, no strings attached.
You can do what you want with it.
Do what you want. That's base funding, and then they get more in from what they apply on, right? So it's wrong to say we're broke, but they've convinced everyone they are. Right. So now people are like, well, I know we can't expect very much for the next 4 years because they're broke.
It's an easy excuse, though, right?
Yeah. So now our expectations are lowered, right?
Can't afford it. And the end of the story, right?
Yeah. And that's the problem. And it's consistent, right? We can't fix healthcare because it's really hard in Canada right now. But so it's the same thing. Well, okay, I get it. It's hard in Canada, so what can we possibly expect?
Well, I mean, I can go back on that because my family, my sister was, one of the first people in my family that moved up here. She came here, early 90s, late 80s as a nurse. She's going to come here for 1 year and work. And what she found when she got here, again, was that everything was better. The bed ratio was better. The way the staff was treated was better. The money was better. If you want people to be here as opposed to, a big city or somewhere a little bit warmer like BC and whatnot, and that has more, has a little bit more to offer when it comes to amenities, you have to give them that,
Better.
We have to be a little bit better in what we're offering those individuals to get them to stay here.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the things that came up with a lot of healthcare people was, of course, we're using these, firms, or bringing it in, and we're paying, the individuals.
The agency nurse.
Yeah. So I mean, we have someone that's standing next to you. You're a nurse that's been working here for a long period of time, but he's making twice what you are. That's hard to swallow.
Look, and these like Northerners, we're all working people.
Right.
Like most people are living paycheck to paycheck, even people who are making good money at the GMWT, right? Because it's expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So when we need to do more for our workers, and agency nurses is a shortcut that every government falls for, right? They're like, well, we need it. It's easy. Let's do it. And the costs get keep escalating and escalating and escalating. And now we're having a conversation about phasing them out or banning them. Many provinces have, but we don't want to do it here because it's just easier for management to solve this problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very frustrating to see that because workers are telling us this is giving us reasons to leave.
Yeah. I know 2 nurses who have left because of it.
And I know even more. That's why we had that town hall, right? So like I stand with workers, and workers are not being treated fairly.
And if those funds
Period.
have been converted some way into increasing the compensation packages in general, would have been a slower process. But would we have gotten staff to come here and stay here?
But
and that's what
the Auditor General of Canada has said. Look at your healthcare spending because it is so poorly managed. Well, they didn't say this, but they said like just look at it. Right? They never do that. They just present the books and say, here's the audited statements. But they're like, take a look at this. And we're like, well, what does this mean? I've never heard this terminology before. It's like a substance of matter or note of matter. And they're like, just look at it. Just look at it. So that's because the deficits keep growing. There's no end in sight. So from a sustainability, government financials, like we're not doing a good job with our healthcare system from that point of view, which is a management thing. It's not the workers on the front line. It's not the patients, right? And doing things like agency nurses are not helping that picture. And then you say, like, I pushed to ban or to phase them out by the end of the end of 2026. No, can't do that because the minister says, I don't want to shut down health centers in small communities. And I said, okay, how many agency nurses are in small communities? Well, none. They're only in Nunavut and Yellowknife. So what's the issue here? Are you planning on putting them in small? No, that's not our plan. So what's the issue?
there isn't one,
Right.
Yeah.
This is like when I was pushing to cut the small business tax rate. They said, well, no one in the north, small businesses get so many exemptions. They don't pay tax here. And I was like, okay, well, if they don't pay tax, then cut it. If no one's paying this tax, just
what do we need it for?
What do we need it for? And,
Yeah.
And then it's just like, no, I just don't want to engage the debate. But like that's the thinking, right? It just
It's baffling. It's baffling. I mean, it's like I mean, there's a push in Canada right now in some areas for privatized healthcare, and I'm not a proponent of privatized healthcare. I grew up in a system that actually worked at one point in time, and it's much better not to pay, right? But I mean, I can see where people are getting that idea right now because the funds are being mismanaged. And if you go down, like for example, in Alberta, when I was down in Alberta, one thing I found really interesting was I could walk into a private agency and get my healthcare card, my driver's license, my vehicle registration, everything done at the same time. I didn't have to make an appointment. I could walk in any time, and it was like bang, 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 and it all just got spit out. It took no time. I mean, I've spent more time sitting in the motor vehicle here to just get one thing.
Well, then you don't even get it. You get it in the mail. Maybe.
The efficiency, there's an efficiency to privatization because at the end of the day, privatization comes down to we want to make, but at the same time, I don't want to see us lose our healthcare system. So we've got to do something at this point to manage it better.
Well, a public system can't survive with a private system.
No, it can't.
And the problem is when you do things like agency nurses and other and like laboratory work and all this kind of stuff, you're slowly privatizing your system, right?
Yeah.
That's all.
Exactly what's happening.
Yeah, slow moving privatization.
People, and then eventually, we end up in a situation where, the system fails, and then we have to go into a privatized system, and now everyone's paying for it.
And there's some critics of the system who've been trying for years, and the Northerners who've been trying for years to get some results, and some of them are at the point where like let it fail because that's the only way. It's just like you said earlier in the conversation, John. Like that things have to completely collapse in the Northwest Territories until people take them seriously.
Start to realize,
and it's too late.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've let homelessness collapse.
Yeah.
Point. Because you know what? We spend more on homelessness per capita than any other place.
Results though.
We have more shelter beds. Like it's
per capita,
per 100,000,
Yeah.
per 10,000 people. We have 21 shelter spaces. The next highest is Yukon with 16, but we still don't have enough. Right? So yeah, we're doing so the government can give us these numbers, but the results aren't there. So the approach isn't working. Right. And again, in other systems, politicians can at least, or if I don't get these things done, I'm going to be showing the door. Right. And we just don't, the incentives don't exist for swift change.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we solve this.
And the problem, of course, is that the homeless thing is magnifying. It's not just dealing with the individuals that we have, but it's increasing.
But it's
more and more.
It's not just they don't have a home, right? It's all the underlying stuff. It's the lack of local treatment options. It's the post generational intergenerational trauma that continues to hold Indigenous people back. It's they're separate when you're living rough in the streets of Yellowknife. You don't have access to your culture, to nature, to program country food, and we need
he was talking about that.
we need to work on like community repatriation. We need to find a way to reunite people with their communities. And I wanted to mention I don't think there's a mismanagement of funds at the healthcare. I think it's not being used efficiently.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a difference. Because one is like padding your own pockets, perhaps.
Yeah.
I just want to get that in.
No, that's
what we're saying. And I know you were.
I'm not
I could just imagine someone calling me and be like, I want you bucket. To be clear, I think it's about efficiency here.
Yeah.
And look, I'm sure there's a lot of people in management at the health authority who don't like hearing that and are like, you just don't get it. And who, live in my riding, no doubt, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we have to have these conversations. And I'm not saying anyone needs to lose their job, but if they're not up to the changes, then yes, they need to lose their jobs.
They do.
Right? And if the minister's not up to the changes, then she has to lose her job too.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the things that's been lost in society is the ability to have a conversation. And ultimately, I may not agree with you, but I want to be able to listen to what you say. And I'm not going to punish you for something or try to punish you for something you say that I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that mentality, that ideological mentality that's hit Canada as a whole now. Is like, we have to talk, guys. Maybe you don't like what I'm saying, but if I say 10 things and one of them is something that can be productive and and useful to the people as a whole, then we need to listen.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a huge problem with the Northwest Territories because people are terrified that there's gonna be repercussions for speaking up against government. And it doesn't matter if you're an employee, anyone, a private business that relies on contracts, politicians who are worried about cabinet ministers being upset. Like there's a culture of fear in our politics that is, I don't know how anyone thinks this is a feature of our system, right? And it needs to stop. Those like the nurses and managers and lab techs who came out to our town hall, because I had a healthcare town hall. Not many of them spoke because they were worried. They were worried about it.
Even the few that did speak created a whole series of memes.
Well, but
sure enough, there was a meeting held by someone in management called those nurses in and said, we're worried you're leaking information to people you shouldn't be. And then there was an intervention from management saying, now there's no consequences. Just read the code of conduct, which all these nurses have. The code of conduct is not a straitjacket or a muzzle that prevents you from saying, I think things could be done better. But that's how people feel. And then when managers do stuff like that,
the extra level of
you're just creating where they're like, look, we're not saying you did anything wrong, but you had to come to this meeting.
But we're looking at looking at and when we were going through the campaign, I just wanted to get a bunch of teachers together, and just talk to them. Not just here in the gym. I wanted to get their ideas, get their viewpoints. A lot of them didn't even want to do that because they were afraid that somehow it's going to get back in
cameras, right?
Yeah,
that's the. But I mean, again, one of the things we should be doing as 19 members is speaking frankly.
Yes.
Because we're the only ones who can. Yeah. We have this thing called parliamentary privilege, where we can say whatever we want on the floor of the House. But I mean, like, I dare someone to try to sue me for saying these are the concerns of the Northwest Territories, and I'm speaking frankly about it. And maybe those are famous last words, but like, we need to have these discussions, and our role in society as leaders, as elected leaders, is to do that, right? But so again, the most successful politicians in our system are the ones, again, who stand for the least, who guard those positions from the public because they're worried about, all these people being mad about the positions you take. Like I had someone tell me, you're the most divisive politician in the assembly right now. Like, really? And they're like, well, yeah, because you take positions and people know where you stand. Well, yeah. That's when I hear divisive. I feel like you're taking very like controversial positions on race and gender, and people are like, oh, right, like a Marjorie Taylor Greene
a position.
Yeah, I'm just taking a position, and it's like, we don't do that here. But that person was wrong, right? Like that is how a lot of people feel.
I think a lot of that too is these MLAs and ministers are worried about pensions and their salaries too. So they're better off being quiet to not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, look, we don't get paid all that well. That's if you want a good paying job, then go in the private sector. But all that being said, like they're not going anywhere, right? Even if they take positions. I mean, like if you're good at this, it takes. I mean, incumbents have a huge advantage because they know how the system works. They know how to campaign. They have their book of people they called last time. They have their signs and storage, right?
It was evident in even the forums how they spoke because they could speak to things differently than the rest of the people could because they had the information.
You tried running for premier against 2 cabinet ministers, right? Including the deputy premier, right? Like but you still can, right? And we need to be able to challenge that. Like outside perspectives are important.
They are.
But like, so if you get elected there, and this is a message for like everyone who's running for local government, for chief and council, for MLA, for MP, don't forget why you're there. You know, don't let this, because look, this is the weirdest job because even studying political science, you don't know how to do it until you're doing it, right? There's no way to have it, unless you've done it before, there's no way to have experience at it. And the more experience you get, typically, the least voters want you, right? Because you're part of the problem.
It's interesting because when I was running, I got advice from someone would give me a piece of advice, and I won't say who it was because I don't want it. But they said, listen, in your first, if you get in your first term, just be quiet, don't say much, don't rock the boat, go with the flow, and then in your second term, maybe you'll get a minister's position, because you're being quiet. And at the end, that's a terrible way to have to look at it, though.
And it's a terrible way to appoint our ministers too.
Yes,
I mean, it did happen.
Yeah,
like the people who came back, and there were a few of them, right?
Yeah,
most of them are now cabinets.
Yeah,
or the speaker or that, and it was only the places where there weren't options that or less attractive ones, I guess, more divisive candidates that didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, all that being, and that's true for any system, right? Just remember where you came from and why you're there to do your job, and don't get overwhelmed by the environment. Like your guiding stone or your keystone has to be your constituency you're from, right? Mm-hmm. And we have very small constituencies in the Northwest Territories. Like I live, not in the center of my riding, but I live pretty much like on the Range Lake Loop, and I see my neighbors all the time.
You're not hard to find, right?
Yeah, I walk my dog. I'm at the park with my kids, right? So I see folks out all the time, and we have these conversations, right? So, and I'm going to go door knock as well. I'm not going to rest on my laurels. Like you got to hustle. That's part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's what you need to do. You have to stay in touch and really listen to people. And I don't have to listen to the premier or a minister or a party leader. I just listen to the people who are on the ground, right? That is one of the advantages I have. But again, when I take those concerns forward and the response is, can't help you too hard, or we're not set up to do that, or
door's already shut.
Door's already shut. Then what do I do? And that's the disadvantage. Right. So it's difficult for that. Because it's one thing to say, well, if we were in government, then we could make these changes. But so we need as a community to solve these, and it doesn't help that most people feel like they can't even raise their voice.
Well, people need, and that's the importance, because you can't identify what the issue is. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, even if they were listening to this podcast right now, aren't aware of even the issues that exist within the system. We've got a great system, right? I mean, that
no parties.
If you don't, but if you don't know, you don't know.
You don't, exactly. Because we don't talk about it.
Yeah,
and
you don't exactly.
Yeah, and don't rock the boat, and you'll get into cabinet. Don't worry, you'll go far.
Well, and you'll slide through on the next election, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's the. But
I have very close friends who give me lots of great advice, right? And some of them still say keep doing what you're doing, but don't go too far. Yeah. Right? Because one day you want to be MP, or you want to do this, or you want to do that, and it's like, but I don't want to be MP just because I like politics. I want to be MP because I'm doing something for the community, right? I'm doing something for all of our communities, and I got this weird skill set that's applicable. But again, I can't just. I want to get reelected if it means continuing to serve people, right? But and getting those results.
And that's why you should get reelected.
That's right, yeah. Right? But I don't want to do it just to do it. I don't want to do it for my pension. I don't want to do it for the wages.
if you, I mean, and again, some people can go too far with rocking the boat, because rocking the boat is a good thing. But if you rock it too much, then nothing gets done either, right?
Don't be an asshole.
Well, yeah,
Right?
yeah. That's what it comes down to. Right?
And once you get to that mode where you're like, am I the asshole? Like on Reddit, right? Like if you have to ask a question, maybe
You might
Might be the
yeah,
asshole.
you might be the asshole. Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, like it goes both ways, right? And that's how a disagreement or taking a hard line can just turn colleagues into enemies, right? And unfortunately, I've been in that place before, and it's not pleasant. And since then we've made up and we've figured it out. I mean, Robert Hawkins and I did not like each other for 10 years.
Yeah.
Weren't talking, did not enjoy each other's company. Let's just put it that way. And now we work really, really well together.
Yeah, I know
having
you guys are
joint
doing some
meetings.
stuff together. And I mean,
And that's growth, right? It's growth from everyone, and that's what you need to do this job. But don't get hung up on the issues you're fighting for or the politics. Just remember, we're all here to do the same job.
we need to learn how to as individuals take criticism as well. At the end of the day, as long as it's productive criticism, because at the end of the day, we don't always know.
Yeah,
we don't always have the right answer.
Well, don't go YK memes. No, that does not help.
No, it does not.
No.
No, I saw. I made it there a few times.
You made it there. Some were good, some were not.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you have to laugh at yourself. And
I found some of them funny. Some of them just didn't make any sense, but you know what I mean?
we've got these traditions that are thousands of years old from a tiny island across the ocean, right? Like, we have to make fun of ourselves because we'll go crazy, right? But yeah.
Well, I mean,
it still weighs on you a little bit. We're like,
There was one I found really funny. Was remember the meme? Me trying to figure out who John Stanley's talking to on that couch.
oh yeah,
Like, that was awesome. I thought that was well thought through, right? That was funny. So
if they're funny, right, and they make sense.
yes,
Some of the memes I've seen,
some of them I'm
don't
looking
make
at.
sense.
What are you talking?
My evacuation meetings were a lot of fun. I did a lot of friends evacuation meetings.
Man, I mean, YK memes has that was needed for the
Yes.
community.
Yeah,
We needed that.
yeah,
Like,
it's funny.
so frustrating. But then when you show up and it's like, oh, I remember how small we actually are.
That's why
That's
it's
good.
anonymous.
I mean, yeah, and I encourage everyone to keep memeing me, right, and meme us all. Every politician needs to learn to listen to themselves, right? Because
For sure, we've got to be able to realize that we're not perfect and make mistakes, and sometimes it's just fun. Even if we're right, it's still fun just to have a little bit of
that's absolutely
someone have a little laugh at yourself. Right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on.
that
This
was
was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, and everyone should listen to this podcast as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll tag you obviously, and we'll send it over, and hopefully, I think people can learn.
Yeah, for sure.
A bit about the system that they didn't know. Just
Yeah, and we're going to do another town hall because I don't like constituency meetings. I don't think they're well attended typically, but I think if it's about an issue and you just say, "Come, you got the mic. Let's listen. Let's hear what you have to say."
Yeah.
That's what I want from a constituency meeting. So I know Robert and I have worked on that. We're going to try to get other members to team up with, pool those resources because we're more effective when we're pooling.
For sure.
That's cool.
So hopefully there'll be more opportunities like that.
I think it's good, man. I mean, it's good to see that the government's on the right path in some areas. I mean, at the end of it, even hearing things like, because the big concerns that come up, whether it's crime, whatever, there's something's being done, something's being worked on.
And we have to be better communicators, right?
Yeah.
And people, this is how you communicate with people.
Yeah.
You not with a press release that's written by 6 different comms officers, right?
Or ChatGPT.
Or ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can you can hear what he's got to say.
Yeah.
He's it's him in the rawest form. It's just we're just here chatting at the end of the day.
Yeah, let's keep it going, right? Again, 40,000 people got to take care of each other. And
absolutely.
This is the one place where we can be real with each other
For sure.
and actually try to solve these problems together.
Cool. I love it.
Thanks again, man.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.